Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. I'm your host Sean Hussey, joined alongside me by my brother Daniel. Daniel, how are you getting on?
Keeping well, Sean. Keeping well. How are you?
Yeah, another busy week end of sport and action and another busy week of sport ahead, which we'll preview later in the week. But we're going to start down with probably one of the better stories of the year and possibly one of the greatest GA stories ever told. Meath, who went from intermediate, won the intermediate last year to go and win the senior All Ireland, beating the four in a row time champions Dublin, local rivals in Crow Park in a fantastic crowd there, fans on the hill, and it just felt like it was written in the stars for me to go and win. And what an unbelievable day of sport it was.
Yeah, absolutely incredible story. You'd have to see it to believe it, sort of thing. Genuinely, like, and I know we say that a lot about a lot of like sporting comebacks, but like this team was hammered by Cork, infamously by 40 points. I think their last championship game against Dublin, they lost by like 18 points. 2018, they got to an intermediate final, lost it. 2019, they got to an intermediate final, lost it. 2020, then they kind of had a bit of experience built in the tank, almost building slowly. They won their intermediate final well in 2020, which was last year, obviously. But I don't think even the biggest Meath supporter could have predicted the trajectory this side could go on. And despite their impressive victories over Armagh and Cork in the quarterfinal and semi-finals, like I personally, obviously, with Dublin massive favourites, I thought Dublin would still have enough to get over the line. But it just seemed that everywhere was not only writing this Meath team off, but they were kind of like almost a bit kind of like there was some publication we won't name. They were kind of saying, oh, like the ladies football, the demise of senior ladies intercounty football because no other counties competing with Dublin now, and they're just going to win a 5 in a row. And this was the analysis on Saturday, and sure, the next day Meath are all Ireland champions. So, do you know, everyone says, Sean, it's a big GA thing. Oh, everyone wrote us off. But like seriously, everyone wrote Meath off, like everybody. So it's an absolutely incredible thing that they've achieved. Like the 30,000, like you mentioned in Crow Park, fans on the hill. It felt like a big moment, not just for Meath, the county, which it obviously was, but for the sport as well. It was a sporting story that people could talk about. It's hit the front page of the Irish Times and every other sporting publication today. And there's a superstar in there like Emma Duggan, who's 19. She's absolutely phenomenal. She scored that incredible goal, which I've watched so many times, and I genuinely think she gave it one of them that keeper's off the line. I'm going to go for it, and if I hit it too far, it's going to be a point anyway. Worst case, and she loves the goalkeeper. It's the goal. It ends up being the difference in the end. It's an incredible, incredible story. Fair play to Meath. It's probably the biggest Meath football moment they've had since the Sean Boylan days. It really genuinely is. To see those fans in Crow Park, all the Meath famous people were there. If you know what I mean. Barry Garrity was there. There were a few other Meath legends in the crowd. There just seemed to be such a buzz about the place. It was like the perfect story for women's football, and it's absolutely fantastic that TG Carr were covering it. There were 30,000+ people there. It was a perfect story that they beat the Dubs. They stopped the 5 in a row. 5 in a row couldn't be stopped in the men's, but it was stopped in the women's. It's an absolutely breathtaking story. It's something that as Irish people we should be proud of. The level of exposure we have now for the LGFA and women's football. It's incredible. And what a story. Just amazing. And again, the sport now has a superstar. They have a storyline and there's people engaged with it, which is absolutely amazing considering a few years ago there weren't. So fantastic. Hats off to them and just an incredible achievement.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned there, and we've actually kind of briefly discussed on the podcast before, like, you know, there's a lot of reasons for people wanting the amalgamation of the LGFA with the GA and to try and incorporate it all under the one umbrella. But what the LFGA have done really well in the last few years is the promotion of Gaelic games and the promotion of the senior women's final as well as the intermediate and the junior. And I think we've seen that in the past with the level of crowd and attendances they're getting at All Ireland finals compared to other sports, other female sports across Europe. And I think that's what's so pleasing about it, Dan, is that they've gone beyond the stage of the initial attraction and the different movements. And then what we saw on the weekend was just high level action, high level skill. But almost what's producing is these memorable moments that they just won't go down in normal folklore. This will go down in Irish sport and folklore as one of the, like I said at the top of the show, one of the greatest GA stories ever told.
Yeah, and the incredible attendances they've had over the last couple of years, I think it culminated in 60,000 pre-COVID or thereabouts for Dublin Mayo. I always feel watching those finals over the last few years that not that the sport was let down, but they weren't classics. Like I remember going to Dublin Cork a few years ago. They were like grand games, but there was no big storyline. The favourites seemed to always win. Look at Dublin winning the last 4 All Irelands, for example. So the sport now has, as the attendance was as nearly as good as the max they could get given COVID and the way they've kind of sold their sport. And the LGFA have a lot of questions to answer in terms of player welfare, fixtures, and not communicating with the Camogie organisation. I do think an amalgamation with the GA ultimately will be best for the sport. However, I do think the LGFA have done a lot of things right, which has to be called out on. Their partnership with TG O'Cahir, RT are obviously not covering the games. The way they promote their All-Ireland final, which is their day. It's their big day in the calendar. Nothing else on that weekend. And I think that would have got lost a small bit under the GA umbrella. I don't think they would have been promoted as good. I don't think you'd have got 32,000 there yesterday, if the GA were running the show in that place. Now, again, I do think there needs to be communication because ladies' fixtures are sometimes put on all sorts of times, and we know a couple of people involved in the sport, but it has to be praised that the way they promoted the game as kind of helped to grow the sport, like simple as. And to see young girls and boys as well, the crowds in there, to see someone like, and I keep going back to her, Emma Duggan, like there is this genuine superstar in a county that was playing intermediate football, last year. And it was almost the best thing for them, the fact they had those 2 heartbreaking final defeats to then go win it a third year. They were ready for, not just ready for senior football, but ready to win an All-Ireland senior championship. It's incredible. And obviously I don't want to put it too much on the GA, but it just shows you you have a juniors All-Ireland final on there. You have an intermediate All-Ireland final and you have a senior All-Ireland final. So you've got 6 counties very excited on All-Ireland final day. And all those counties, those 4 other counties would have waited around to watch that senior football final and to see Meath win it. And imagine being the intermediate champions or the junior champions looking at Meath going, this is what we are capable of if we put, and it takes nothing but hard work, putting that in over a 4 or 5 year period. And the GA learns anything, the men's game, from watching the women's game. That All-Ireland final day should be an All-Ireland, at very least a B championship and an A championship. But really, like it does in every single county across the country right now in GA, you have a junior championship, you have an intermediate championship, and you have a senior championship. But like this story, I cannot see it being replicated in any other walk of GA or LGFA, to go from winning the intermediate the year before to then winning the senior against the 4 in a row, going for 5 in a row champions under Dublin, under one of the best managers in Mick Bowen. It's incredible. Absolutely. It's amazing. It's unprecedented really in the sport, and full credit to Meath. And thought Mick Bowen spoke well after the game with Dublin. He said full credit to Meath. He did say something along the lines of they've no prima donnas now. If you want to read into that maybe he was having a very slight pop at the players, but I thought he was very like, they took to the feet well, Dublin, like true champions, and the players did too. So it was a brilliant day for the sport. Absolutely.
Yeah, you touched on it there. Emma Duggan scoring 1-2 and coming up with the crucial goal, Meath winning by 2 points. Like, just on that goal itself, Dan, obviously it comes straight from the kick out. I know you mentioned it earlier, like, is that just a part of maybe something in I don't want to go into too big a thing here, but maybe in the men's game or different games where you probably see that ball maybe more recycled? And I think with the game we saw at the weekend, with how there was so much attacking going on and players joining in the attack, a couple of the cornerbacks on either side got points. Do you think that's something different, I suppose, in the women's game?
I wouldn't be like sure on that. Like I've watched the kick out a few times. It's overhit by, a yard too. It's a yard too high. Do you know what I mean? And before you know it, like, I think that's brushed over if Emma Duggan, is blocked down or whatever, doesn't get her shot away. So I think that the women's game is becoming more like the men's. There's a lot more tactics involved. Obviously, there's a few different rules, like everyone knows. The most obvious one is the pickup. Like one of the goals, I think it was in the junior final, was literally palmed in from a yard out. Literally palmed into the goal. I was like, well, that's not allowed. But obviously, it's different rules. The tackle line, and Mick Bowen spoke about it earlier in the year, that they want more physicality in the game because the players, it's getting to that elite level, the serious standard now, that there should be more physicality allowed in the games. It's getting a lot more professional now, like the men's game was a few years ago, but it's definitely catching up. And I do think there needs to be more allowed of that. But in terms of the kick out, I actually think it was very, very unlucky on Dublin's part. It was just the wrong person for Dublin got it. And she's like, the technique in that kick, the way she kind of has her body, I genuinely, she thinks she's going for it. One of those, just keep her off the line. If it goes over, it's not. But I wouldn't read too much into the kick out because I think it was just overhit by a yard or two. And I don't think It was just a real opportune goal, an amazing goal. And again, you have to be proud as a country that our front page, and especially the Irish Times, I thought was amazing, which we shared on all our social media, Sean. You had, Leona Maguire in the middle, you had Meath on the left, and you had Katie Taylor, 19-0, that kind of not went under the radar, but was definitely the third story out of them anyway. Yeah, she's got 19-0 in professional boxing. Women's didn't have professional boxing a few years ago. You know what I mean? The women's boxing wasn't in the Olympics until 2012. Katie Taylor wins. Katie Harrington won it this year. Do you remember I said to you in April that Rachel Blackmore has the Irish Sports Personality of the Year wrapped up? Well, and I know you had a little dig at me a few weeks ago that it's under pressure with the Olympians, and I agreed. Well, now we're in massive trouble. massive trouble. I don't know who we're going to give it to. Like, who do you give it to? I'd have Emma Duggan nominated anyway, 100%. I'd have Katie Taylor probably won't get nominated, but she's 19-0. Katie Harrington I'd have up there. I'd have Rachel Blackmore up there. Leona Maguire has to be in there now. Guiding, we're just watching. It's not quite over yet, but Europe are going to win the Solheim Cup, we think. And Leona Maguire's won the most points ever by a rookie, 4.5 points, blown every single golfer out of the water. So who's going to win it? Who would you like? It's not really a fair contest. It's whoever gets the most votes. But that's before we get into anyone else I've forgotten about.
And I think the thing with Rachel Blackmore is I actually think you started to think about it around Cheltenham time, and then obviously she went on to Aintree and won the Grand National. So there's it's definitely been, I suppose, especially after the year previous that we had with a lot of sport not kicked down the line with COVID and stuff, for this year to really have it back. And you're right, some of the Olympian successes we've had, Rachel Blackmore at Cheltenham, and then obviously what we've had in the last few days with Leona Maguire as well. And maybe just before we get into that, I mean, the story of Eamon Murray, the Meath manager, I think that has to be given a special mention. I know it was an emotional couple of days for him as well. And some of the, just going back on some of the articles that have been written about him before, I was reading a few, and he's just talked about wanting the players to bring a smile back to the people in Meath's faces. And, Meath is such a historic entity in particular, and obviously we know quite well our cousins from it. They've had a lot of success underage, particularly in the boys. In football, they really are one of the shining lights in Leinster football, and we're unlucky to lose that minor final to Tyrone a couple of weeks ago. Or sorry, they won that minor final a couple of weeks ago. But it just shows you now how big a tide it is turning. We saw that the emotion around Offaly winning now, what Eamon Murray and the Meath side have given, it's just unbelievable.
And it's the year of shocks in football. Like, you look at, Jesus, I can't believe you said Tyrone beat Meath in that final. Geez, good luck to you going back to Nava next time, but to be honest, rather you than me. No, Meath, but like Tyrone missed a fair few chances. But it's incredible. Meath winning a minor All-Ireland title should be the heading this year. But then you get the Offaly winning the under-20s, that Shane Lowry factor, you can't get away from that. I don't think the financials made too much of a difference yet, but his presence, the ability to kind of saying, lads, we believe in you. Michael Daigan, you won't get a better county chairman in terms of profile, in terms of his passion for the games and local level. And then you have Meath doing this incredible story, which again, I'll repeat, 3 intermediate finals in a row, finally get over the line. Oh, what we'll do next year? Oh, we'll go and win the All-Ireland. So, and yeah, you mentioned like the Meath manager and all the management team. There's so much involved, particularly in counties like Meath, that like what we've talked a bit about, Dublin have these advantages mainly because they're the locality of Dublin. But for me to, for years being in Dublin's shadow in ladies football, to go ahead and win the All-Ireland, it's just a great story. But it's been a great story of 2021, Sean. But all 3 of those stories are going to be overshadowed on Saturday if Mayo end the curse and win the All-Ireland. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I think while you were saying that, I was just going, I hope Tyrone win it now, because it would be it would be such a mad year. And obviously with the end to the provincial championships last year with Cavan and Tipperary and the story from that, so, there's been a lot of feel good stories after probably a couple of disappointing years for GA, particularly football, when after Dublin won the 5 in a row, and maybe the lack of competition.
Oh yeah, I've definitely got my buzz back for not just Gaelic football, which these are all Gaelic football, the women's game included, but just sport. And it's great to have proper sport back in front of crowds. All those games, yeah, as far as I remember, were in front of crowds, at least the finals, where you can't replicate that. We were there for Dublin Mayo beating the Dubs, Sean. Like, I know Dublin lost, but the noise in that place with 24,000 people there, it's incredible. And it's been a long road. And I do think the pandemic has not not that it's influenced all these results, but it's definitely, there's a little bit more, I don't know, passion or a little bit more belief, or people are reassessing their lives, and you don't know what people have gone through during lockdown, that we're all somewhat back to some sort of normality, watching sport, talking about proper sport in front of full stadiums or half stadiums, but it feels like it's full or twice. It's like the noise in that place, for, again, I go back to the Ireland semi-final, which is all I have to go on, but the noise coming out of the TV, watching those Meath fans on the hill, Jesus, was unbelievable. Oh, absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, I think you're dead on there. We're going to actually move on now to the Solheim Cup, and what has been, I suppose, one of the underrated stories of the season has been the rise of Leona Maguire and what she's done over the summer in particular, and her rise, especially on her first year in the LPGA Tour. And she's someone who was so, as an amateur, her and her sister were so heavily named, and everyone in Irish golf knew about her. But now I think everyone in the world knows who Leona Maguire is. Dan, 4.5 points from her 5 games this week at the Solheim Cup. She's the only player across both sides to do 5 games. And how often, and this is the thing I was so impressed with today, is how often, even go back to the Ryder Cup in Paris, how Tommy Fleetwood won his first 4 games alongside Molinari and then couldn't get it done in the singles. The burnout, Tony Fleetwood, 4 up through the front 9. She absolutely blitzed. He absolutely blitzed her this morning, and this afternoon rather, and she is well on her way into that contention, Dan, for the Irish Sports Person of the Year award.
Absolutely amazing. And the year she's had is incredible, and it's been slowly building up to this, the LGPA performances in virtually normal regular events and the majors. And I'd say herself, she want to be nuts. Yeah. It's no harm in saying it. She probably was disappointed with her Olympic performance, because, well, I'm not saying she should have gone out and got a medal. I think, she kind of fell away. Like, she started okay. She was in contention maybe for a top 10 or something, kind of fell away. And yeah, that might have hurt a small bit. And coming into this, like, I wasn't nervous for her, but, did I think she'd get 4? I didn't think for a second she'd play the 5 games. So that's great captaincy, the way Leona was kept on. This is the player in form here. 4 balls, foursomes. But I'd agree with you. I was like not nervous. I didn't want to say anything, but I was like, singles now is a different kettle of fish. Like you said, can't really follow that up. Then she hits that shot into 3, the eagle. I was recording something else, so I haven't seen much of it after that, but that was unbelievable. 9 wood. So that there's one for you golfers out there. 9 wood's the secret to golf, I think. I think you hit about 12, 14 foot boy, maybe 10 foot boy, and holds the putt, and you're just like, wow, okay, we're 1 up here. We're after getting eagle. Okay, this is serious. And we both follow No Lane Up. I'd highly recommend any golf fans to follow No Lane Up on Twitter. They're amazing. Sean, you presume you've kept an eye on them this week, but the only person aside from that rules thing they'd be tweeting about is Leona Maguire. Leona Maguire this, Leona Maguire that, Maguire capital letters. That's amazing. It's amazing exposure for her. And she's lived up to that promise from a youth age. It's an important point to make that you do kind of forget. I think of Leona Maguire as the golfer that's come along the last few months. You forget the expectation she had on her shoulders along with her sister. All this, all that. Not just fulfilling that expectation, but exceeding it. The first ever Irish player in a Solheim Cup, the first ever rookie to have this many points before the singles. So now she's smashing all records. Guarantee you no rookie will get 5 out of 5 points in the Solheim Cup ever. So she's got that 4.5. That'll never be beat. You know what I mean? So it's just incredible. I've said incredible a lot, I think, but it's amazing. And that sports front cover really resonated with me, because it's only a couple of years ago I'd be listening to podcasts talking about the lack of exposure for women's sport. We had the FAI thing with the tracksuits and changing in toilets in airports and all this, and they fought, and that was the story recently, that they're getting equal pay, same with the men's. And I think people are starting to view women's sport as sport now, and I think people are starting to view it all as sport. And the reason is, well, go back to the LGFA again. Don't want to be praising them too much, because I know people in the LGFA or who play women's football are not too happy with this, but they've done amazing promoting the sport. Leona Maguire on her own has done enough for Irish women's golf, or Irish golf, in the last few years, considering we haven't had that major winner outside of Shane Larry. Obviously, I should take that back slightly, but she's done incredible. If you're a young boy, young girl watching Leona in a team environment in the Solheim Cup doing that, it's inspiring. And obviously you've been in the Olympics as well, so. And obviously too, Katie Taylor as well, going 19-0, and there's barely a mention of it. Not just because it's probably not covered on TV. And again, we'd love her to be fighting in Ireland as well. But absolutely incredible stuff. And Leona Maguire, and you watched a good bit of Leona this week. Weekend. Obviously, you've watched probably more than I have. I've been the Twitter man, keeping up to date, or on the Guardian live commentary. But you've been equally impressed with her, I think.
Yeah, and the thing that really impressed me, because I remember watching or seeing the day one list came out, and her and Mel Reid were paired up against the Corda sisters. Now, anyone who follows women's golf knows that the Corda sisters are the most feared players out there, and for her and Mel Reid to smash them aside, and to go up. And the thing that's impressed me with the couple of times they've had to go up, her and Mel Reid go up the 18th. They've got the job done as well. So there's absolutely no question in my mind that Leona Maguire has announced herself. I think she's. To be honest, I think she announced it to the tour this year already. I mean, shooting 61 in a major, just flawless rounds week on week, and just building up slowly. But I think she's announced herself more now to herself, and she's probably proven to herself. And I think someone who has to take an awful lot of credit as well is Niall Horan, because his golf company, Modest, Leona Maguire falls into that category. She's a part of the team. But what he's doing for golf, I think, is so. Just on a side note, is so important, because it's really helping the game. The money that he's putting into different tours, the kind of the up and coming tours, the challenge tour. There was an event in up in Galgorm Castle, I think, this year already, and the kind of exposure he's given golf is so important for the game, and I think golf almost needed a recheck. And golf, to me, since COVID, has probably been the sport that's delivered the most so far. The storylines, in the last 12, 15 months, some of the playoffs, the titanic battles we've had. And I think looking ahead to the Ryder Cup in a few weeks, I think it's going to be unbelievable. The golf at the Olympics, how the drama of trying to get third place. So it's had a really, it's kind of groundbreaking 12, 15 months golf has, because it's broken and got the sport to new parts and to new people who probably haven't seen an awful lot of it. And that's through the Olympics. It's through different events that people like Niall Horan are involved in. And for Leona Maguire, the guidance now that she has, and I suppose the status she has on tour now is just probably a weight lifted off her shoulders. She's made it this year already, but this week as well, I think will just prove to her that she is, one of the best golfers in the world. And I think for a while there, Irish golf went through a golden generation. There's no doubt about it, of Clark, McDowell, Harrington, McIlroy all winning majors. Then along came Shane Lowry. For a few years, what Ireland did, I think we were only behind America or South Africa for major wins. For a small island like ourselves, is truly incredible. And there's probably that little bit of negativity looking around now, going, who is going to be Irish golf next star? And I think there's no doubt now that Leona Maguire has got the game. She's competed now really well in a few majors, a couple of really good results, and she is someone who we should be looking ahead, potentially the next major champion from Ireland. And I think that is so important for us now, that we have someone like her who is on top of her game at such a young age as well. And that's really important for not just women's golf, but for Irish golf as well.
Yeah, final thing on Leona, I'll say it'd be very important for her to get that first win under her belt. Through no fault of her own now, there's going to be a lot of media outside of Ireland on her to get that first win on the LPGA Tour, but no doubt she'll get it done. And talk about inspiring the young and old golfers of our generation. You know Shane Sexton very well. Good friend of mine, roommate here, and I've just gotten word that he played 10 holes in O'Connor tonight and got 6 birdies. So if that's not inspiration for you, what is?
Yeah, and I think that fearless factor, and the thing as well is her own self belief in herself, really. And we've seen it this week, where she's kind of playing alongside Mel Reid, who hasn't. It's been quite, I suppose, in the press a lot, that she probably hasn't had the best run of form as maybe she once had. But what she has given that new lease of life, and Leona Maguire has been the standout player at this Solheim Cup by an absolute country mile. And like I said, to beat the Corda sisters, Nelly Corda, who is, won her major this year, won the PGA, then won Olympic gold. She's the superstar of women's golf. And she's had a really poor week, and that first day really probably shook her a little bit by Leona Maguire. And like I said, 4.5 points. Europe are going to win the Solheim Cup. Katrina Matthews picked her as a wild card. She's got the mid-season form, and she's been proven right, and the selection has been vindicated. So it's been a roaring success. Leona Maguire, hopefully a win that will be confirmed in the next Cup as we're recording on Monday night. and now just it gives you that little bit of look ahead to the Ryder Cup. And obviously we've got the BMW PGA at Wentworth, which is always a brilliant event, an event that Shane Lowry has a lot of course format. The Ryder Cup team is being picked in the next week or so by Padraig Harrington, who's the European captain. So there's a real, I suppose, couple of weeks for Irish golf coming up, and Leona Maguire has set the world on fire, if you like, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we talked about the FedEx Cup. I was very disappointed with it this week. We won't get into that. There's no negativity on this podcast, but I thought the format's brutal. Maybe it's just the way it fell this year, but I'm just so bored of it. Maybe it's just the Solheim Cup, but I gave it my as much as I could on Saturday and Sunday night and just wasn't impressed. Pretty boring. 3 players in contention for the whole week, but Irish golf, like you said, it's a big few weeks. The Ryder Cup's going to be incredible. I think the Solheim Cup will give people even more of a buzz to show. Yeah, we're going to have Shane Larry in it pretty much, but we're going to have Padraig Harrington. And for some reason, like the legacy, Sean, like Paul McGinley's legacy. Look how his media career is picked off the back of winning the European Ryder Cup. I know Darren Clarke's still playing golf, but losing a Ryder Cup for some reason, it just means, he didn't put enough work into it, where, that's not necessarily always the case. And Nick Faldo will be remembered for not winning in 2008. So massive pressure on Harrington. It's an away one. It's a tough one, but we're hoping he'll do it, definitely. But exciting few weeks for golf. And I'm not a fan of the FedEx.
And I think the Ryder Cup with the American team and the Brooks Bryson, and I think it's going to be a amazing couple of days at Whistling Straits, which is obviously a brilliant golf course for those that remember the 2010 PGA with the Dustin Johnson in the bunker. But we're going to move on again to a story that's probably been overshadowed. We mentioned her already, Katie Taylor. I mean, this fight kind of crept up slightly on a lot of people. And I think it so often does with Katie, because she's been there. We've seen so many of her fights before. And Eddie Hearn, I think, said that he'd like to see Katie retire undefeated. I don't think we're going to see too many more fights from Katie Taylor. I think she'll want to have it, but you're looking around going, who's left for her to fight? She's absolutely destroyed that division. And she, is a little bit a victim of her own success, but I think we just have to marvel at how good a fighter Katie Taylor has been, and what an ambassador she's been for Irish sport over the last 13 years or so.
Incredible. I think it kind of passed a lot of us with Sky Sports, and not being honest, and everything that was going on this weekend. Like, you haven't even talked about the Ireland game yet, but the incredible Solheim Cup, the LGFA on the Sunday. It's a pity that Katie, she can't fight in Ireland for whatever reason. There's various reasons, not just the fact she's with Eddie Hearn, but the logistics of having a fight in Ireland. That's through no fault of her own. But yeah, it's a pity that realistically she'll probably retire not fighting in Ireland professionally, which is a disappointment, to be fair. But she'll definitely go for the 20 100%, and probably might retire in the next couple of fights, because there's only so much she can do in the sport, and you'd obviously want to see her retire on a high, because we know how dangerous the sport is, like a lot of sports, but boxing in particular. And the fact, Kelly Harrington, is the important thing to say. She's amateur. She's staying amateur. So my big Katie Taylor. Well, that would be the fight. How the fight would be done, but Kelly Harrington fight probably won't happen, or it won't happen. But Katie Taylor, like, there's not much more you can say. Only incredible, absolutely incredible what she's done for women's boxing, what she's done for boxing in Ireland, and inspired a lot of people. And well, I know Katie Harrington was already fighting. Seeing Katie Taylor win Olympic gold kind of proved to her that she could definitely do that as well. So amazing, incredible, and just another win for Katie Taylor. Like, what more can you say? Just very emphatic this time. It's the only difference.
Yeah, defended her title in Leeds at the weekend. We've had a lot of positivity on the podcast. Before we go down, we're going to have to mention just briefly ahead of the Serbia game tomorrow night, which I'm going to, what was a very positive night, albeit the result was very disheartening against Portugal with the way it finished. I think Saturday was a really poor day for Irish football, and probably a realization of where we currently are as a football nation. Certainly, in the men's team, there is a real lack of quality, compared to where we were probably even 6 or 7 years ago. Dan, this is not a good period for Irish football, and it's about finding a way through it, isn't it?
No, it's not. The stat today I read, we've won 5 of our last 31 competitive internationals, including the likes of Moldova, Georgia, Wales without Bale, we're nowhere near the standard we should be. But I don't think this is all Stephen Kenny's fault. I think what Stephen's trying to do is correct. It's the right thing to do. I harp on about it all the time, but I'm going back to the Michael O'Neill example. He won one game in his first 18. Go look at the team he had. Go look at the teams he was playing. The similarities between that and us is very similar. Like, do you know what I mean? Stephen Kenny's got one win in 15. Like, there's been improvement over the last few games. There has, Azerbaijan aside, like, you can put stats whatever you want. I think we've lost one of our last 5 games. All right. So the Serbia, Portugal in the qualifying were our best performances. Luxembourg was absolutely terrible. Azerbaijan, stupid goal we conceded. And look, we managed to get the point from a Shane Duffy header, but I do think it's worth sticking at it. And I think it's worth sticking at it to the next qualification campaign 100%. Now, obviously, if you go out and do 7-0 to Luxembourg and 8-0 to Azerbaijan away, then obviously you're going to have to look at things. But leaving the Serbia game aside this week, I do think it's important that we stay patient and stay with the course, because even if Stephen Kenny isn't successful, if we give him enough time to bring these young players through, the next manager, so long as he's off the similar thinking, he will be successful, or at least he'll try and continue that on. But it's very hostile at the moment on Twitter. You're Kenny in or Kenny out. I personally, you can criticize Stephen Kenny and also want him to stay on with the job. Like, you've got a lot of things wrong against Azerbaijan, but I do think there's something worth sticking at based on that front three, which were 20, 21, and 19, based on a team that's trying to play some sort of football. I understand we went across the second half. There was a bit of panic in it, all right. But look, I'm not saying he hasn't had the luck, but a lot of things haven't gone our way. Look, if Aaron Conley gets a penalty, we win 2-0 in Portugal, or at least we get something out of the game. And we can't go. We're not that good to be. We're not better than Portugal, and we're better than Azerbaijan. We're somewhere in the middle. Those two performances, and I think there's worth sticking out with Kenny to the end of the qualification campaign. Definitely, then give him the chance in Euro 2024, provided there's no disaster coming up over the next few games.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's probably killing Stephen Kenny at the moment is his contract doesn't run currently towards that next campaign. So I mean, there really is a big decision ahead for the FEI, and to see what happens. And it'll probably show you where their head is at currently, not to use a Love Island term, but judging by reports, I mean, I don't think they know what they want. I don't think they know the answer to this, because at the end of the day, the players that Ireland have been putting out onto the pitch are not of a suitable quality, and there is a clear lack of a goal scoring threat, and there's a lot of really good honest players who will put in a shift and love playing for their country. But at the end of the day, if Ireland are to get to a major tournament in the next few years, they're going to need a little bit more than that. I think Tuesday night is a massive game, not for Ireland necessarily, but for Stephen Kenny. I think we need to get something positive, because if people leave the Aviva again and people at home leave this international break again with a sour taste in the mouth, I think that could be one too many looking ahead for Stephen Kenny. But we hope, certainly on this podcast, that the work he's done in the League of Ireland, the work he did with Dundalk on the budget compared to all the other clubs that are in Europe, what he has done in Irish football over the last 5 or 10 years, I think he deserves a chance to try and find a way out of this. Whether there is a way out of it, that remains to be said. But I suppose, Dan, it's going to be a massive game on Tuesday night, and with Steve and Kenny, you almost feel sorry for him at this stage, that everything that happens just seems to go against him at the moment, and that is not a way to be in any professional sport. It's not the right mindset to have, but you do have that element of feeling sorry for Stephen Kenny, don't you? It's his dream job, and it just really hasn't gone well.
Yeah, and look, the second captain's debate was interesting today. I know Ken came out defending him a lot, like he really did. And I'm ultimately a Kenny in, and I would accept a lot what Ken says. Like, we aren't as good as we think we are. We have overachieved in the past through various things, but we've also had better players. I don't know. I do get this sense that there's two kind of supporters here, and unfortunately, it's turned into, from those two kind of supporters, into Kenny in and Kenny out. There's supporters of the Republic of Ireland national team that tune in to watch 3 games, and then they'll make their judgments there. And then there's supporters of Irish football. And what Stephen Kenny said today, he's not trying to win the next match, which obviously you need to be, but he's looking ahead to the future as well as trying to do that. And maybe I get carried away with projects as much as the next man, but I'd like to see us stick at it for a bit here. I'd like to see us let's say provided nothing disastrous happens for the rest of the qualifying campaign and we go about par, to give them to the end of Euro 2024, because we're not qualifying for a World Cup. We qualified for, one World Cup in the last 20 years. Do you know what I mean? Or no World Cup in the last 20 years. Euros are our only way into tournaments realistically. And this 2014 format helps us. And at the end of 2024 campaign, we can make a call on it. But yeah, it doesn't look good. There's a lot of people talking about it. Good sources are saying that there's going to be a meeting after the campaign. But I've also read other sources saying Kenny's job is safe. Look, it's definitely an us versus them kind of thing here. And there needs to be more of a balanced view. Like, I thought the balance on RT was fairly good, to be fair. Lisa Fallon, Kevin Doyle spoke well enough, saying, criticize Stephen Kenny, but like they weren't calling for his head or anything, saying, look, it was a very poor performance. Like, I messaged you after saying it was brutal. It was terrible. But like, looking back on it, look, we didn't deserve, like, we probably did enough to draw it, and we probably did enough to win it. But I guess you don't get always what you deserve, and there's no real excuse against Azerbaijan or Luxembourg. But let's be realistic here. Like, the players we have at the moment, is there another manager out there that can get more of these players? Probably in terms of setting a team up, maybe more defensively, possibly. But I don't know. I give Kenny credit for the Portugal performance. I give him credit for the Serbia performance as much as I criticise for the Luxembourg, Azerbaijan. It's just too small a sample, and everyone's saying 1 in 15. COVID's been a disaster. Like, it's not, the real football's only get going. We talked about crowds at the start of this podcast. Let's get behind a manager here and really support him. But I'm very nervous if Tuesday doesn't go well.
Yeah, and I think Tuesday could well end up to be the litmus test. But the one thing that, just before we go, I think some of the names that have been linked with the job are kind of dreamland. Just, I think people need to remind themselves of the FAI's financial state and some of the decisions they've made in the past. So I don't think we'll be going down some particular routes that I've seen people.
Does it?
No, like I was talking to somebody the other day about it, and they're like, "Why don't we go down the Trapattoni route?" And the first person that came to my head was Capello, and then was Sven-Goran Eriksson. So they don't come cheap. I'm sure their interpreters don't come cheap either. But that's all from the podcast this week. We've got a really exciting couple of days coming up. We've got the All Ireland men's final this Saturday. Hopefully Mayo are looking to win their first All Ireland since 1951, and Tyrone are looking to upset the apple cart, as they so often have done in the last 20 years or so. So whatever happens, it's sure to be a really barnstorming weekend. I'm sure a lot of people are starting to get nervous. I know the hunt for tickets is ongoing. And then also we've got the Ryder Cup coming up, and a big week of golf, particularly for someone like Shane Lowry at Wentworth, where the race or the Ryder Cup qualification comes to an end, and it'd be brilliant to see him as one of the automatic picks. But Daniel, thanks very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks.
And that's all from us. Make sure to get us at social media, leave a like and comment on the podcast below. Make sure to get your podcast suggestions into us at Tackling Sport across our social medias. And for all, at the moment, that's for all. And my thanks to Daniel, and we'll see you next time on the Tackling Sport podcast.